Winter arrived early the year Margaret Vale died. The city wore coldness like old aristocracy wore perfume, quietly, elegantly, without apology. Snow gathered along cathedral rooftops and iron fences, while church bells drifted through the gray afternoons like voices from another century. Victor Hale loved winter funerals. People were easier to rob when grief froze their attention. He stood beneath the dark stone archway of St. Aldwyn Church, with one gloved hand resting inside the pocket of his wool coat, watching mourners disappear through the heavy wooden doors one by one. Black umbrellas, black coats, black eyes hollowed by obligation rather than sorrow. Most funerals were performances. Victor had learned that long ago. At 36 years old, he could read grief better than most priests. Real grief moved differently. It made people quiet in strange moments. It made them forget names, forget gloves, forget entire conversations halfway through speaking. Fake grief checked watches and adjusted ties. Tonight's funeral was full of fake grief. Victor lit a cigarette slowly, while snow drifted around him in pale silence. Margaret Vale, wealthy widow, 74, dead from heart failure, according to the obituary. No children, no close family nearby. And most importantly, rumors said she had worn the same diamond ring every day for 40 years. Victor exhaled smoke into the cold air. "The dead don't need jewelry," he murmured softly. He had been repeating that sentence for nearly 20 years now, long enough that it almost sounded true. The cigarette burned quietly between his fingers as his thoughts drifted backward toward another winter long ago. Another funeral. His mother's. Victor had been 15 when cancer hollowed her body down to bones and whispers. Too poor for flowers. Too poor for proper burial services. He still remembered watching strangers lower her into frozen ground, while his father stood drunk beside him, pretending not to cry. No elegant church, no candles, no mourners dressed in expensive black wool. Only mud. Only cold. Only humiliation. That was the day Victor stopped believing death made people sacred. The rich buried their dead beneath marble and music, while poor families borrowed money just to purchase coffins. After enough years, bitterness became philosophy, and philosophy became profession. Victor flicked the cigarette aside and entered the church. Warm air and candle smoke greeted him immediately. St. Aldwyn smelled ancient. Old wood. Wax. Dust trapped inside stone, older than memory. Rows of candles flickered beneath stained glass windows, while soft organ music echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Beautiful. Mournful. Empty. There were fewer than 20 mourners inside. That unsettled Victor slightly. Margaret Vale had been wealthy enough that more people should have attended, but the people present avoided each other's eyes. They whispered nervously. No one stood close to the casket near the altar. No one cried. Victor moved silently among them with the practiced elegance of a man who understood invisibility, well-tailored coat, calm expression, handsome in the forgettable way that allowed people to trust him instinctively. He sat near the back pew and studied the room carefully. An elderly woman crossed herself repeatedly. A younger man stared toward the stained glass windows instead of the coffin. Two sisters whispered near the entrance. Did they find it? No. Victor's attention sharpened instantly. The ring. Good. That meant it remained with the body. The priest began speaking softly near the altar, but Victor barely listened. Religious words bored him now. Heaven, peace, eternal rest. People invented beautiful language to hide their terror of disappearing. Victor's gaze drifted slowly toward the casket. Margaret Vale lay inside beneath pale candlelight. Even death looked expensive on her. Silver hair folded neatly around her shoulders, black velvet dress, thin fingers resting across her chest. And there the ring. A large antique diamond, surrounded by dark emerald stones. Victor felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline beneath his ribs. Not greed exactly. More like hunger. A need older than morality. The priest continued his sermon while snow tapped softly against stained glass. Victor waited patiently. Timing mattered. Funerals always created moments of distraction. People lowered their heads to pray. Eyes closed. Silence deepened. That was when he moved. Smoothly. Quietly. He approached the casket with respectful slowness, pretending contemplation. One gloved hand rested briefly against the polished wood. No one looked directly at him. The church lights flickered once overhead. Victor gently touched Margaret Vale's hand. Ice cold. The ring slid halfway free immediately. then stopped, tighter than expected. Victor pulled slightly harder. The church lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the sanctuary. Gasps echoed around the room. Someone whispered a prayer. Victor's pulse spiked violently. For 1 second he felt another hand close around his wrist. Not tightly, just enough. Cold. Very cold. The lights returned instantly. Victor stepped backward sharply. Margaret Vale remained motionless in the casket, her hands folded peacefully, but the ring now rested inside Victor's palm. Around him, mourners murmured nervously about the power flicker. No one appeared to notice what he had done. Still, Victor's breathing felt uneven suddenly. He glanced once more toward the dead woman, and froze. Her eyes were open, only slightly, but open, watching him. Victor nearly dropped the ring. Then an elderly mourner moved between them, blocking his view. When Victor looked again, Margaret's eyes were closed once more. He left the church immediately after that. Snow had deepened outside, covering the streets beneath silver moonlight. Victor walked quickly toward his car, while keeping one hand inside his pocket, wrapped tightly around the stolen ring. Cold. The ring felt strangely cold. Even through leather gloves. "You're imagining things," he muttered. Still, he could not shake the feeling that something had changed inside the church when the lights went out. Something unseen. Something aware. By the time Victor reached Margaret Vale's estate nearly an hour later, the storm had worsened. Vale Manor stood isolated at the edge of the city, beyond iron gates and dead gardens buried beneath snow. The mansion looked less like a home, and more like a mausoleum, pretending to be alive. Tall, black windows overlooked the frozen grounds. No lights burned inside. Victor parked near the side entrance and stepped into the storm once more. The ring remained inside his coat pocket. Heavy. Colder now, somehow. The side door unlocked easily, using a key lifted earlier from one of Margaret's relatives during the funeral reception. Victor slipped inside silently. Darkness swallowed the manor. The air smelled old. Dust, perfume, burned candle wax, and something faint beneath it all. Roses. Rotting roses. Victor clicked on his flashlight and moved deeper into the house. The beam-illuminated antique furniture draped in shadow. Grand staircases curved upward beneath crystal chandeliers. Portraits watched him from the walls with faded aristocratic eyes. Every clock in the house had stopped. 1-1-4-1. Exactly the same time. Victor noticed that immediately. Another bad feeling moved through him. The mansion did not feel abandoned. It felt paused, as though someone had simply stepped into another room moments ago. Then he noticed the candles. Dozens of them burned throughout the house. Fresh flames, fresh wax. Someone had lit them recently. Victor frowned. Hello, no answer. Only silence. Then, somewhere deeper inside the manor, a cassette player clicked on. Static hissed softly through the darkness. Victor slowly followed the sound into the living room. An old cassette recorder sat alone on a table beside the fireplace. The tape crackled. Then an elderly woman's voice spoke softly through static. "If someone is inside my house..." Victor froze. The voice continued. "Please return what belongs to the dead." The tape stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Victor stared at the recorder, with cold sweat gathering slowly beneath his collar. "No," he whispered. Impossible. Someone was playing tricks. That had to be it. Victor reached into his pocket immediately for the ring. Empty. His stomach dropped. He searched the other pocket. Nothing. No. Then slowly, very slowly, he looked toward the center table in the living room. The ring sat there beneath candlelight, perfectly centered, waiting for him. The ring on the table. Victor Hale stood frozen in the center of the living room inside Vale Manor, staring at the ring, resting beneath candlelight. The antique emerald diamond glimmered softly against the polished wooden table, exactly where he had not left it. Snow whispered against the tall windows outside, while the cassette recorder sat silently beside the fireplace as though it had never spoken at all. Victor's pulse hammered slowly behind his eyes. "No," he whispered. His gloved hand instinctively checked his coat pocket again. Empty. He knew it had been there moments earlier. He remembered the cold weight pressing against his palm as he entered the manor. Yet now, the ring waited for him in the center of the room, like an invitation. Or a warning. Victor approached carefully. The mansion creaked softly around him. Old houses always made noise, he reminded himself. Pipes, wood settling, wind slipping through forgotten cracks. Still, something about the silence inside Vale Manor felt attentive, like the house itself was listening. Victor stopped beside the table and stared down at the ring. Up close, it looked older than he first realized. Victorian, perhaps. Dark silver filigree twisted around the emerald stones like dead vines. Tiny scratches covered the surface from decades of wear. Margaret Vale had truly never removed it. Victor reached toward it slowly. The candles throughout the room flickered all at once. His hand stopped immediately. Then came a sound upstairs. A soft dragging noise, like furniture moving slowly across hardwood floors. Victor looked upward. The second floor disappeared into darkness beyond the staircase. "Someone's here," he muttered. That explanation comforted him slightly. A person meant logic. A person meant tricks. He preferred thieves to ghosts. Victor picked up the ring again. Instantly, the dragging sound upstairs stopped. Complete silence followed. The ring felt painfully cold against his skin, now even through gloves. Victor shoved it quickly back into his pocket and moved toward the hallway. He needed to find the safe before anyone returned to the house. Rich widows never kept only one valuable item. The manor stretched endlessly around him. Dark hallways lined with portraits. Grand mirrors reflecting candlelight in long, trembling shapes. Antique clocks frozen at different hours, as though time itself had fractured inside the house. Victor entered what appeared to be Margaret's study. Bookshelves towered from floor to ceiling. Dust floated through pale candlelight. An old gramophone sat beside a leather chair facing the fireplace, and on the desk another cassette recorder. Victor stopped breathing for a second. The recorder clicked on by itself. Static crackled softly. Then Margaret Vale's voice filled the room again. "If you are hearing this." Victor stared at the recorder. "Then you touched the ring." Her voice sounded calm, educated. Old European elegance wrapped around exhaustion. Victor slowly backed away from the desk. "This is insane." The tape continued. "My husband believed objects carried grief inside them, especially jewelry worn during sorrow." The recorder crackled faintly. He was right. Victor turned sharply toward the door. For one brief second, he thought someone had moved past the hallway outside. A shadow, tall, thin, gone immediately. His heartbeat quickened. The tape continued. "If you stole it, she has already seen you." Victor felt ice slide slowly through his chest. "She," he whispered. The recorder suddenly stopped. Silence swallowed the study again. Victor stared toward the hallway. Then, from somewhere upstairs, came the sound of a woman humming softly. The melody drifted through the manor like smoke. Slow, beautiful, ancient. Victor knew that melody somehow. It took him several seconds to understand why. His mother used to hum it while sewing late at night. Victor's face slowly drained of color. No. Impossible. He stepped into the hallway again. The humming continued upstairs. Soft footsteps followed it now, one step at a time across the second-floor corridor. Victor moved toward the staircase, despite every instinct warning him not to. Halfway up the stairs, he noticed the photographs. Unlike downstairs, these family portraits had not been turned over. Margaret Vale appeared in nearly all of them beside the same man. Tall, severe-looking, always wearing black gloves. In every photograph, Margaret wore the ring. Victor continued upward. The humming stopped the moment he reached the second floor. The hallway stretched long and dark before him. At the far end stood a bedroom door slightly open. Warm candlelight flickered inside. Victor approached slowly. The door creaked wider beneath his hand. Margaret Vale's bedroom waited beyond it. Everything inside remained untouched. Perfume bottles rested neatly atop the vanity. Dresses hung inside an open wardrobe. A half-finished cup of tea sat beside the bed, as though someone expected Margaret to return any moment. Victor moved carefully toward the vanity mirror, and froze. Written across the glass in faint fogged letters were the words, "Return it." Victor stumbled backward. No. The room suddenly felt much colder. Then the wardrobe door creaked softly behind him. Victor spun around instantly. The dresses inside shifted slightly, like someone moving behind them. His breathing became shallow now. He reached slowly toward the wardrobe. The mansion groaned somewhere below. Then came the sound of the front door slamming shut downstairs. Victor jumped violently. Footsteps echoed faintly through the first floor. Slow, measured, walking beneath the bedroom. Someone had entered the manor. Victor rushed into the hallway. Hello, no answer. Only footsteps continuing below him. One step, another. Then silence. Victor looked down over the staircase, railing toward the dark entrance hall beneath him. Empty. Yet he could feel presence there. Watching, waiting. A grandfather clock somewhere deeper inside the house suddenly chimed. 1, 2, 3. Victor frowned. None of the clocks worked. The final chime echoed softly through the manor. Then a woman whispered directly behind him. You took it. Victor spun around so fast he nearly lost balance. The hallway stood empty, but the bedroom door behind him had closed by itself. His pulse thundered painfully now. Who was there? No answer. Then slowly, very slowly, the bedroom door began opening again on its own. Creak. Victor backed away. Inside the room, the vanity mirror reflected candlelight softly, and seated in the chair before the mirror was Margaret Vale. Victor stopped breathing. She sat perfectly still in the reflection. Silver hair, black velvet dress, pale hands folded neatly in her lap. But when Victor turned toward the actual chair, it was empty. Only the mirror showed her. Margaret slowly lifted her eyes toward him in the reflection. Victor staggered backward. You're dead. Margaret's lips moved faintly. You touched what belonged to grief. The candles inside the room extinguished instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. Victor heard movement all around him now. Soft fabric brushing the floor. Footsteps. Whispers. The manor no longer sounded empty. It sounded occupied. Victor ran. He rushed down the staircase toward the entrance hall, nearly slipping against polished wood. His breath came sharp and uneven. He no longer cared about safes or valuables. Only escape. The front door appeared ahead beneath flickering candlelight. Victor grabbed the handle violently. Locked. No, no. He twisted harder. The door would not move. Behind him, somewhere in the darkness of the house, the cassette recorder clicked on again. Margaret's voice echoed softly through hidden speakers. Some things buried with the dead do not wish to be carried away. Victor reached into his pocket immediately. The ring burned cold against his palm. Then came another voice. Male this time. Deep. Close. Margaret. Victor turned slowly. At the far end of the entrance hall stood a tall man wearing black gloves. The same man from the photographs. His face remained hidden in darkness, but Victor could see one terrible detail clearly. Around the man's finger was another identical emerald ring, what belongs to the dead. Victor Hale stared at the man standing at the far end of the entrance hall and felt something inside him begin to unravel. The figure remained motionless beneath the dim chandelier light. Tall, elegant. Black gloves folded calmly behind his back, and on his finger gleamed the second emerald ring, identical to Margaret Vale's. Snow whispered against the windows of Vale Manor while candles flickered softly throughout the hall. Victor's throat tightened. You're not real, he whispered. The man tilted his head slightly. Neither is grief, he replied softly, until it enters a house. His voice carried the calm weight of old aristocracy, European, cultured, the kind of voice that belonged in libraries and funeral hymns. Victor backed slowly away from him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere left to run inside the manor. The front door still refused to open. The windows reflected only darkness, and somewhere deep inside the house, another cassette player clicked on. Margaret Vale's voice drifted faintly through hidden rooms. He never removed the ring either. Victor's breathing became uneven. The man stepped forward slowly. Candlelight passed across his face for the first time. Victor nearly stumbled backward. The man's features looked unfinished somehow. Not decayed. Not monstrous. Simply incomplete, as though death had erased parts of him but forgotten others. His eyes remained entirely black. You stole from my wife, he said softly. Victor forced anger into his voice because fear alone would destroy him. She's dead. The man nodded once. Yes. Then he looked toward Victor's coat pocket. But grief survives burial. The candles dimmed suddenly. The manor groaned around them. Victor reached into his pocket instinctively and pulled out Margaret's ring. The emerald stones looked darker now. Wet somehow, like they held old rainwater inside them. The man watched the ring carefully. "She wore it when our daughter died," he whispered. Victor froze. The house became silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. The man continued. "She wore it at the funeral, at the hospital, during every sleepless night afterward." His voice remained calm. That made it worse. By the time Margaret died, the ring remembered more sorrow than love. Victor's fingers tightened unconsciously around it, and suddenly he saw her. Not Margaret. A little girl standing near the staircase. 7 years old perhaps. Dark curls. White winter dress. Her throat bruised black. Victor inhaled sharply. The child stared at him with empty eyes. Then she vanished. The manor lights flickered violently. Victor staggered backward. What is this place? The man looked around slowly at the house. A mausoleum. Then he smiled faintly. For people who refuse to let grief die. The cassette recorder crackled again. Margaret's voice whispered. "We kept hearing her after the funeral." Victor's stomach tightened. The man closed his eyes briefly. At first it sounded comforting. Small footsteps upstairs. Laughter in empty rooms. His black eyes opened again. Then the house learned her voice. The temperature inside the manor dropped sharply. Victor could suddenly see his own breath. From somewhere upstairs came the sound of a child humming softly. The same melody Margaret had hummed inside the church before the lights failed. The little girl appeared again, this time standing halfway up the staircase. Watching Victor, her bruised throat looked darker now. Victor stared at her in horror. The man whispered. "She drowned in the frozen lake behind the manor." The girl tilted her head slowly. Margaret never forgave herself. Victor felt cold spread beneath his skin. She blamed herself for looking away only a moment. The man looked toward the staircase. "And I blamed Margaret." The child smiled faintly. Then the entire staircase darkened around her. Something moved behind the girl. Tall, long-limbed. Wrong. A shadow wearing human shape. Victor stepped backward immediately. "What the hell is that?" The man's expression finally changed. Fear. Old fear. It arrived after the funeral. The creature behind the child unfolded slowly from darkness. Its body bent unnaturally. Its arms dragged too long against the stairs. And its face kept changing. Margaret, the drowned girl, the black-eyed husband, then strangers, then Victor himself. The creature smiled using Victor's own face. The cassette player hissed violently. Margaret's voice cracked through static. "If someone steals from grief, the house lets it inside them." Victor's pulse thundered. "No." The creature stepped downward slowly. The drowned child remained perfectly still beside it. Victor turned toward the front door again and pulled desperately. Still locked. Behind him, the creature descended another step. The man in black gloves watched silently. "You brought it here with you," he whispered. Victor turned sharply. "What? You thought theft only touched the living." The creature's footsteps sounded wet against wood, but every stolen thing carried sorrow attached to it. Victor remembered the ring sliding from Margaret's dead hand inside the church. The lights failing, the cold fingers touching his wrist. The creature continued downward. Victor backed toward the dining room blindly. "I never killed anyone." The man's voice softened with terrible pity. "No." The creature reached the bottom of the staircase. "You only fed on mourning." That sentence hit harder than accusation. Because Victor suddenly saw it all clearly. The funerals, the widows, the trembling old hands, the dead treated like opportunities. For years, he had convinced himself he stole objects. Not grief, not memory, not love. But he had. The creature stopped moving. Its shifting face settled briefly into Victor's own reflection. "You already belong to us," it whispered using his voice. The chandeliers above exploded. Glass rained across the hall. Victor ran. He rushed through dark corridors while the manor groaned violently around him. Doors opened by themselves as whispers flooded the house. Thief, grave robber, parasite. The cassette players throughout the manor all clicked on together. Margaret's voice echoed everywhere now. "Return what belongs to the dead." Victor stumbled into the study again. The gramophone had begun spinning by itself. Old funeral music drifted through the room. The portraits on the walls looked different now. Every painted figure wore black mourning veils, and in every portrait Victor stood among them, older, pale, Dead-eyed, the creature appeared in the doorway behind him. Victor grabbed a fireplace poker desperately. "Stay away from me." The creature smiled with Margaret's face, then the drowned child's face, then his mother's. Victor froze instantly. His mother looked exactly as she had during the final winter. Thin, exhausted, ashamed that poverty had stolen dignity even from death. "You hated funerals because no one mourned her properly," the creature whispered gently. Victor's hands trembled violently. "She deserved better." The creature stepped closer. "And so did everyone you robbed." Victor collapsed slowly into the chair beside the fireplace. The poker fell from numb fingers. For the first time in 20 years, he allowed himself to remember the funeral honestly. Not the humiliation, not the anger, but his mother's cold hand inside his. The loneliness, the helplessness, the unbearable terror of watching someone disappear forever. Tears burned unexpectedly behind his eyes. The creature stopped directly before him now. Its shifting face finally settled into nothing at all. Only darkness remained beneath its skin. Victor whispered brokenly, "What do you want from me?" The answer came from Margaret's voice, through every cassette recorder in the manor. "Mourn properly." The house fell silent. Victor looked slowly toward the ring, still clenched inside his hand. Cold, heavy, filled with decades of grief. He stood shakily and walked back toward the entrance hall. The black-eyed husband waited there beside the staircase. So did Margaret, and the drowned child, all watching him silently. Victor approached the center table where the ring had first appeared. His hand trembled as he placed it down carefully beneath candlelight. The moment the ring touched wood, the entire manor exhaled. The light softened, the cold faded slightly. Margaret closed her eyes. The husband lowered his head, and the drowned child smiled for the first time. "Not frightening, just sad." Victor whispered, "I'm sorry." The child vanished first, then Margaret, then finally the man in black gloves. Only the candles remained. The front door unlocked softly behind him. Click. Victor stood motionless for several seconds before slowly opening it. Snow drifted silently across the empty grounds outside. Morning light had begun touching the horizon pale gray. Victor left Vale Manor without taking anything. Months later, rumors spread through the city that Margaret Vale's antique ring had been buried beside her during a private ceremony. No one knew who returned it. Victor disappeared from funeral circuits entirely after that winter. Some claimed he left the country. Others claimed he entered a monastery somewhere in Eastern Europe. But years later, during another winter funeral inside St. Aldwyn Church, an old groundskeeper swore he saw a well-dressed man standing silently near the back pews after midnight, not stealing, not speaking, only watching mourners cry. And when the church lights flickered briefly, the groundskeeper noticed something strange. The man wore black gloves, and on one finger gleamed an emerald ring that should have been buried with the dead.